Hello, I'm Sirish Rao, your host for the evening, and it's great to be coming to you here virtually from the Chan Center for the Performing Arts. On behalf of the whole team here, thank you for tuning in. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for this special Q&A with the artist of Parashakti, The Flame Within. I want to begin by acknowledging that here at the Chan Center for the Performing Arts, we stand on the ancestral, unceded territories of the Musqueam people. And I really want to thank the Musqueam people for their stewardship and their care of these lands that we continue to enjoy. And I realize that many of you may be joining from other places, other parts of the world, and we respect and acknowledge the traditional and unceded lands that you live on as well. I'm really so thrilled to introduce these wonderful artists tonight. I feel very lucky to have had, the best seat in the house. I mean, there were 1,200 seats to choose from. So it's, in this time of the pandemic and empty concerts halls, it's been a treat for me to listen to live music and see this wonderful dance. And so the pleasure is all mine. On my left is Arno Kamolika, the wonderful dancer that you've just seen. Here on my right, Akhil. It's not my custom to show my back to the people I'm interviewing to, but such is the exigency of the time. Behind me is Srividhya Sairam. On the other side is Satpreet Singh, who was on the dilruba, Sharanjeet Singh Mand on the sitar, and Mr. Curtis Andrews on percussion. So a big welcome to all these wonderful artists. This evening is about the mother goddess, about Parashakti, who is sort of the absolute divinity. And the idea of the mother goddess is present in many cultures. In Hinduism and Hindu mythology, she takes many shapes and forms, many of which are explored here. In Greek mythology, for example, to draw a parallel to the Western world, the closest thing might be Gaia, the Earth Mother. But it's quite a complex thing to explore, and many of the divinities in Hindu culture have many arms and many heads. And so too, this organism that has created that. So I thought we'd get a chance to talk to each set of arms and heads and get to hear from you as to how this all came about. I'll start with Akhil Jobanputra. Akhil started his musical career at the age of 3, which is really, bordering on illegal. And Akhil, and then at the age of 11, he founds the Indian Classical Music Society of Vancouver, which is the group that has put this all together. And Akhil has had training with local teachers abroad. And apart from making me feel inadequate about what I've been doing with my life, Akhil, you're also a recent UBC grad who didn't get to walk the stage. And here you are, performing on it.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful turn of events, and I'm very grateful to be here on Chan. A few months after my virtual graduation. So
Akhil, since you and I have been chatting, we'll start with you. I just really wanted to know how this project came about. How did the concept of Parashakti, the absolute divinity, the goddess, come to you?
Yeah. So. After I was reached out to by the Chan Center to curate something for them, I was trying to figure out what would be a good type of theme to cover that would translate well to the audiences, that would be also easy enough for us to put together, amassing a team that has never worked before with, content that a dancer might be most familiar with. And I've recently, been going on my own journey, exploring the Mother Goddess a bit more personally. So I thought that, the first production should be dedicated to her. It's the only way that, we should go about doing this. So Parashakti came to mind, and really I would say the narration came into fruition after, Arno came on board as the co-director and the dancer. We had a lot of back and forth Zoom calls, trying to figure out what to do, what pieces she had to work with, what pieces we could, maybe put together as a musical team. And yeah, that's how it all started.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's actually quite interesting. The group of you have never worked together. So, in fact, we the pandemic has done so many things, but in a strange way, this togetherness of us being a good 6 feet apart, safely distanced on stage, but also that all of you could collaborate in this way and that we can still meet our audience is amazing. And I'd like to, since you mentioned Arno as your co-director, and she's sitting right next to me, and I just watched her do this incredible performance, but also choreograph and also stage manage things. You're wearing many hats here, Arno, and Arno comes from Bangladesh, lives in Vancouver now, and again, similar to Akhil, has had training from local and international teachers, and that's an ongoing process. But what I find interesting about Arno's work also is that, Arno, you're steeped also in mime, in theater, in architecture, and I think it's interesting that you're bringing all these disciplines to dance. And tell me a little bit about that, and tell me a little bit also about the search that you have in working with traditional forms like Bharatanatyam and searching for new ways of storytelling.
Oh, that's a big question. I think I would just talk about our process here and how because what we have done here is what I actually want to do as an artist, because I always feel that one artist cannot create something new. It's only when you react to another artist, there is a chance of a creation. And I just feel so blessed that I have had the opportunity during this time to work with so many different kinds of artists who are coming from not only different kind of art forms, but also different cultural backgrounds. We speak different languages at home. We have learned different art forms. We don't know anything about each other's forms, except the fact that all of us, I think, just has deep respect for each other. And whatever, like, we have faith that the other artist is doing something that is good. And we are just trying to, I would say that, react to and feed from that. So I have been doing that actually throughout this process. And thanks to Akhil for thinking of me as a capable enough dancer to put a narrative like this. And we have used so many different kind of songs. Like, Akhil actually came up with a Bangla song. It was not me
I heard
who came up with it. So it was very interesting that how everybody is so, that cultural synthesis is working in such a great way here with Hindustani tradition, Carnatic tradition, and Curtis Dada bringing his own, percussions, Satpreet, Sharanjeet, everybody. So I think my work, if I have to say, is I like it when I get to collaborate with other artists and I get to learn from them. So that's what I'm trying.
Oh, well, thanks for saying that. And actually it does bring up this very important point, I think, when people think of South Asia or South Asian artists or South Asian people, I think there's sometimes a tendency to see it as a monolith, which of course it is far from. I mean, we're talking, first of all, of a couple of billion people. So,
Yes.
But as you point out, the different linguistic, cultural, performance traditions that actually you don't all speak the same artistic language, really.
Yeah.
You come from different worlds, so it's almost like getting a jazz musician,
Yes.
a classical Western musician, and saying, okay, now work out this piece together. So I think that's a really good point that you made. So thanks for, and isn't that weird? I mean, that's also like something that came out of the concept of the Mother Goddess through this narrative.
Yeah.
Is realizing the unity in things.
Yeah, and I think that's why we all could connect, because who can't connect to the concept of mother? Who can't connect? So it's just everybody. When I was, there was in the rehearsals, there were moments when magic was happening. Like, there were moments when the script probably finished, but the musicians kept singing or playing, and I kept dancing. So as artists, I think we all thrive for those moments. We don't really live for the performance. We live for those moments that gets created, I don't know how, and we just feel blessed that in this, like, we have been in isolation for over a year, and then when we could come together, even wearing masks and on Zoom, like, we are still alive. That feeling was amazing.
Yeah. And in a way, this whole project is that sort of ode to the giver of all life, right? And that sense of being alive. And so I thank you, Arno, for those beautiful words. And Srividhya, we were just chatting. Srividhya and I both have spent time in the southern city of Chennai on the sea in South India, and it's so great to have you here on this part of the world. Srividhya is an accomplished artist, very recognized, comes from the Kalakshetra school in Chennai, which is one of the premier institutions of classical dance and music, performs on All India Radio, which is that's very difficult to achieve, really. And is kind of the hallmark in India of the caliber of artist that she is. And just wanted to hear a bit from you, Srividhya, if you could share with the audience a little bit about your inheritance, your performance tradition, and the role that you've played in this act of storytelling.
Thank you, Sirish, for the introduction. And it's been a wonderful journey so far. And just a little bit background about myself. I come from Kalakshetra, and also I had private training under my guru, Srimati T.M. Prabhavati, who herself is a senior-most disciple of Padma Bhushan Dr. M.L. Vasantakumari, one of the doyens of Carnatic music. So I was fortunate enough to be under her tutelage for quite some years before moving here. So it was, and regarding this project, I think it's been such a wonderful collaboration. Just to, as Arno mentioned, just to meet all the artists from different walks of life. And the best part about this project was, it was not a very conventional kind of thing where the artist or the dancer has something preconceived in mind and they are just calling the musicians and say, okay, this is what I'm going to dance and this is what you should sing. But then what is happening during the rehearsals where the dance and the music were co-emerging. So we didn't have anything in mind, and we all came with an open mind, and then we saw what was coming out, and then we picked out the best out of it, and we decided to keep it. So I thank all the artists here for being, so open-minded and inviting all the good ideas that others had. So that's one of the best things that I had experienced here, and of course it was such a privilege to work with wonderful artists like Akhil, Satpreet, Sharanjeet, and Curtis, and Arno. So thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity.
And I think, we move from Srividhya to Satpreet just a few feet away on stage, but culturally speaking, we're moving 2,500 kilometers from the south of India to the north of India. And Satpreet's training and musical influence, is in the Hindustani world. And the instrument that you saw during the performance is the dilruba, and the dilruba is an instrument that holds very special significance. I think, of course, to Sikh culture, because it was an instrument that was, in fact, invented by Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, and I think in a way, it's the voice of a people. And you carry that with you. And again, Satpreet, another musician who started at the age of 5, learning tabla from Amarjit Singh, I think, who's a very well-known local artist, and then went on to learn dilruba from Baljit Singh. Devinder Singh, sorry, yes. And so please tell us a little bit about your journey and your instrument, because I think it's really fascinating.
Thank you, Sirish ji, for the introduction, the amazing introduction. I don't deserve any of what you said to me, but thank you. So I originally started my musical journey by learning tabla from my father when I was about 4 years old. And he was a tabla player. He grew up playing tabla. And his parents, his father used to sing, my grandfather used to sing. He used to do kirtan. So from there, that's when I started getting interested towards music, because always hearing music, tape recordings, CD recordings of different artists. So I wanted to play tabla, and I have a twin brother, and both of us, we started playing tabla.
Wait a minute. No, am I getting this right, that you're Amarjeet Singh's son?
No.
Okay. Okay. It's just like, oh, wait a minute.
So after that, I learned tabla with my brother for about 7 years, from the age of 5 to the age of 12. And from then, I made the transition to dilruba, because I always wanted to play a string instrument. It was at the back of my mind for a long time, but I decided to act upon it, and then it kind of took over from there. And I've been playing dilruba ever since, and it's been 4.5 years since I've been playing dilruba.
And the dilruba has a set of strings that you play, but also these sympathetic strings that run under, that almost resonate along. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the main strings, there are 4 strings at the top, and you play 2 of them. And those are the ones that you play with the bow in your hand. And then the strings at the bottom, the reason they're there is to tune them according to the rag, which you're going to play. And I'm not quite sure about the science behind it, but when there's a similar frequency and sound, they vibrate. So if you have a note such as sa that you're playing on the string, the bottom strings, the sympathetic strings that are tuned to sa, they vibrate as well, and they create a really full sound. And they also it also improves the tone quite a bit.
Well, I mean, in a strange way, that's what Arno's been saying. That's what happens to artists as well. Like one artist creates a sound, and there's almost a sympathetic response, like these strings to that sound, and it grows or it becomes more complex in that process. And so thank you for your artistry, and that links that string that binds you also to Sharanjeet. Sharanjeet is a sitar player. A sitar is probably the instrument that most people know beyond those that are cognizant of the Hindustani tradition because of Pandit Ravi Shankar and the Beatles, and that instrument really, I think, was popular. So it's very hard to speak of the sitar without invoking Pandit Ravi Shankar, whose 101st birthday it would be this year. So there were a lot of celebrations last year. And I think, Sharanjeet, you were actually on this stage at the Chan Center a couple of years ago when Pandit Ravi Shankar's daughter, Anushka Shankar, performed. So great to see you back here again, and love to hear from you about you, your instrument, and this project.
Sitar as my instrument, I don't treat it anymore as an instrument, but it's a companion to my musical and spiritual journey. And what is special about sitar, like for all the instruments have a soul, a spirit, right? So sitar has a spirit which is a beautiful amalgam of joy and little bit of melancholy. So it finds a very nice balance in there. So if you play it virtuosically and play jhala, right, and then it evokes such a joyful feeling. But a slow part when played on sitar, it's very meditative as well. So my relationship with sitar is more of a companion, and I'm grateful that I got it as part of my lineage from I'm learning from Pandit Harvinder Sharma, who is disciple of Ustad Vilayat Khan Sahab. So there's always this dominant force of spirituality and music in our tradition. So that's also talking of this project, because despite we come from different walks of life and different traditions and different understanding of our art forms, but music and the title concept of this project, motherhood, are two very universal things. And when they blend together, I think differences are too pale before these two concepts. So we all tapped into that resonance which you were talking earlier, that sympathetic resonance of motherhood and music. And that spiritual alignment allowed us to actually come to this place and do music, take part in this creativity. Dance, one more thing, because dance is an act of happening, right? So always when I'm participating as a accompanist to dance, so when you play sitar or you do music, it's like vibration at a quantum level. And to see it happening at a real level, that same vibration always allows you to learn more about your music. So I'm very grateful. It's a, I think, great initiative after 1 year of nothing happening, and to find myself here is absolutely a blessing.
Oh, thank you. And it's fascinating to hear that thing of vibration at a quantum level, because when I come to Curtis Andrews, who plays the mridangam, and we talk of percussion, there is this myth in Hinduism about the origin of the universe, which is essentially a big bang. The idea is that Shiva's drum, Lord Shiva's drum, the damaru, makes this incredible sound. And from that sound is born the universe. From that sound and its continuous echoes and reverberations go our heartbeats, So it is actually the concept of a universe born of sound, and sound being very much part of our bodies. And so that is the best way to segue to Curtis Andrews, who is, plays the mridangam in this project. And I've been noticing everyone, and that's something I want to remark on, perhaps the audience has picked this up too, is that everyone has mentioned their teachers and the lineage they come from, and that is hugely important. And I'm sure Curtis will reference his teacher as well. But apart from learning in the Carnatic tradition, Curtis also has several jazz projects that he does. Time Will Tell Society is his aptly named umbrella that he does his work under. And also, Curtis is an ethnomusicologist, so he's the doctor of the drum. He's got a PhD from UBC. So thanks, Curtis, for being here, and let's hear a bit about the mridangam and your work.
Thank you, Sirish. Yes, before everything, definitely, I must acknowledge my guru, Shri Trichi Shankaran. He's the only teacher I've ever had in this Carnatic Mrdangam journey. I was not an early starter like most people. I didn't start at 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 even. I started playing the Mrdangam about 20 years ago, actually. Yeah, 2000 is when I first started, I believe. And I had no training or any heritage or any upbringing with Indian music at all, Carnatic or Hindustani. And it was only seeing him perform the first time that was a revelation for a drummer. I was a drummer already performing music. So to see and experience his vidwat, and for him to open a door into a vast universe of rhythm that I didn't think was possible. It was both scary at the beginning, and also it made me laugh, actually, what he could do rhythmically. It was like, oh my God, you can do that. That's amazing. So it evoked a lot of interesting feelings. Scary because I knew that this was something I wanted to go towards that would take me on a different path that I was on. And I'm happy I followed that path, because here I am today with all these great musicians and dancer. But yes, Mrdangam and Carnatic music is not the only thing I do, as you say. Rhythm is really what directs me in my life, what I'm interested in, or where I travel, whatever it may be. I always use that as the guiding principle. If something resonates with me in some way, to use the sympathetic vibration metaphor that we're on, that's what I gravitate towards. And I'm happy that all these people that I really didn't know anyone here actually before. Only Shri I met a couple of years ago. But we happily vibrated well together. This was somewhat effortless, I have to say. Work, sure, we had to work at it, but there's no egos. Lots of respect for everyone's ideas. So in that sense, it was easy to work with. So I'm happy. Hope we can do more like that. So thank you all for having me as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to hear sort of echoes and things that all of you are saying. And also, I do want to recognize that in many ways, You all form a sort of cultural bridge because, I came here from India and, coming from being exposed to this kind of artistry as part of life, and then here, not really having that much access to it, I think for audiences and for artists, you perform a very important a role of cultural bridges. And I think in expanding the notion of what an artistic language is, I think, Arno, your performance is language. It's a whole language of its own. I don't even know if you want to share a bit more about what you were saying with your hands, which we're constantly mesmerized by, or the emotions that you display.
Yeah, maybe I will talk a little bit about our concept, and then I'll let Akhil also, because this whole idea of Parashakti came from his head, and he has this. We were trying to work with binaries, and the initial idea was also that we won't really stick to only physical attributes that we always see. We will. So we have a term called rasa in our culture of Indian classical music and dance. So we were trying to create some moods and some narratives based on some specific rasas. And that's how, we thought, okay, we can go with the bhayam, which is the fear. And the Devi Kali seemed appropriate to talk about that rasa. Yeah. And then when we went to when we were talking about chaos and harmony, nothing but nature came to our mind. That Saraswati, though we were trying to think of it as, musical and non-musical, but at the end we ended up using Kamaj. That seemed like the right choice. And then we just thought that what can be better than just using the nature of, British Columbia and whatever we see around us. That is Saraswati, when everything is in tune, when everything is in sync. And then we went to Lakshmi, and it was like we thought, okay, even in thirst, the mother is there. She shows us the thirst to like sometimes she doesn't give us everything to so that we can appreciate what we have. And then when that rain comes, that's when we actually appreciate that blessings more. So, and we were, it's so amazing. You started with the Greek goddess, the earth goddess, because in Lakshmi, in my head, I was thinking of the goddess Lakshmi as the Mother Earth. And that's how, so it was very, I would say, it was not traditional Bharatanatyam show. I didn't think of it as that. But I would definitely want Akhil to, explain it a bit.
Thank you. And I want to pull out two things you said there. One, of course, is essentially what you were saying is you were making a land acknowledgement, which is something we did formally at the beginning, but that's essentially, this act of recognizing landscape, of paying obeisance. And certainly during the pandemic, we've come to realize what's important, and that's been distilled. And the other thing I just wanted to explain for folks is, when you mentioned the rasas, this is fascinating performance theory that comes from the 2nd century in a text called the Natya Shastra, which really informs a lot of Indian dance, music, and performance traditions. The Navarasa are the 9 emotions. It proposes that there are 9 basic core emotions that everybody feels everywhere in the world. And the duty of the artist is to evoke that in the audience. And then, of course, there's this beautiful cocktail of mixing fear and anger to get hatred and, various other things to get this palette that you've evoked. So I think in the 2nd chapter, that's where you really go through the gamut of emotions, and that's perhaps something for people to keep in mind, that's what you're doing.
Yes.
But I'd really, it would be nice to sort of conclude this conversation by going back to Akhil and the concept and the idea of the goddess. And the title is Parashakti, the flame within. So tell me more about the flame within. Tell me more about.
Yeah, so maybe I'll do a small walkthrough of the chapters, which might help explain it a bit more. So in chapter 1, we really start off with understanding the three main forms of Parashakti. Now, this is inspired by a text called the Devi Mahatmyam, which is popularly, used in goddess worship in India, especially during the time of Navratri, which coincidentally there's a Navratri right now. So things lined up pretty nicely that way. So that piece is called Parashaktis Triad. So we start with Mahakali, who's the personification of destruction, of, consuming and recreation, I would say. And then we move on to Mahalakshmi, who again is the goddess of sustenance, of earth, of wealth, of prosperity. And then we go to Mahasaraswati, who of course we know is the goddess of music, of sound, of speech, and of knowledge. She's originally a river goddess, actually, so that represents the flow of knowledge from place to place, person to person. And then, like Arno mentioned previously, the idea was to then move away from simply form, from attributed personalities. And in the second chapter, like Arno said, we really wanted to explore this concept of rasa. But we also wanted to understand how rasa is formulated, in the minds of those experiencing it. And it's done through sensory experience. And there's this beautiful term in Kashmir Shaivism called samarasya, which obviously has the word rasa in it, looking at understanding binaries of Shiva and Shakti, of consciousness, manifested energy, illusion, reality, and trying to understand how to absorb that within yourself. So over here, we start with chapter 1, the devotee is mesmerized by the forms of the goddess. And in chapter 2, the devotee is going on their own journey of understanding how the goddess takes shape through these experiences from rasa, how they sense the world around them. And obviously we have one, each of these three segments in chapter 2 are also dedicated or formed around one of the goddesses. So the first part of chapter 2 is around Kali, like Arno said. The second part is around Saraswati, and the third part is around Lakshmi, specifically in her form as Bhumi Devi, goddess of the earth, and even Annapurna, the goddess who gives sustenance. And then this moves on to the last chapter, which is really now where the flame concept comes in. So again, the narrative drew a lot from Kashmir Shaivism, and in that tradition, it's said that when the devotee is starting to become enlightened and consciousness and energy meet, it's actually Shiva and Shakti coming in union in their heart center. And this flame of passion, this burning passion of theirs, overrides the devotee, and the devotee essentially becomes Parashakti in the process. So we start with Jwala Prajwala, which is the flame building up, and you'll see Arno beautifully, encapsulate that in her arm movements. And then that goes into a rhythmic piece called the Tilana, and in the beginning, Shri and I are both singing together, which is supposed to parallel this union of Shiva and Shakti. And the devotee becomes consumed with that feeling, and then the only thing that rests is bliss. And all these binary modes of experience, of binary rasas, binary and conflicting thoughts, all dissipate. Or rather, I wouldn't say they dissipate, but they are acknowledged and given their own due, but we don't realize them as conflicting anymore. Hate and happiness, you can't have happiness without hate, vice versa. You can't have the sun without the moon. So all of that comes into play in the last chapter. And then the devotee filled with bliss just rejoices with this realization. And the piece at the end, which was suggested by my Guruji Pandit Arijit Mahalanabis, which I'm very thankful for, because Bengali is not my language, so there's no other way I would have come across this piece. And it talks about the devotee not wanting to let go of the idol of the mother goddess, They don't want to submerge it in water, which is usually what's done at the end of Durga Puja occasion. And this, I think, symbolizes in this context that they don't want to let go, and it's not really the idol that they're saying they don't want to let go. It's that they don't want to let go of this realization they've had. The idol is inside them. Their body is the idol of Ma now. So they're not wanting to let go of that realization. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Akhil. And I mean, I guess in almost every culture until not that long ago, most art was created in some way as an ode to the divine or a way of reaching the divine. And, whether one takes a religious or a secular lens to that, or in fact what all of you have done with this new kind of storytelling is maybe to explore a new way in which you find, whether the goddess represents emotion, whether that goddess represents an ideal, whether it is our ecosystem or society. I think you've pointed to all those ways in which, an ode to the mother goddess could be a path, for our own transformation. And thank you so much, Akhil, Srividhya, Satpreet, Sharanjeet, Curtis, and Arno for your wonderful performance, but also for taking the time and generosity after a long day of hard work to share these thoughts with us. And I really want to thank everyone who's tuned in to this program and to the Q&A for joining us tonight. And I also want to say that, a work like this is made possible by an incredible crew of people who are behind the cameras, behind the microphones, doing these stages, and the people who program and spread the word about all of this. So a big shout out to everyone at the Chan Center for keeping this going in this time. It's so crucial that the arts keep going and that audiences and artists get to meet in this way. So thank you for your artistry, everyone in tech and production. And another artist is this concert hall itself. The Chan Center is so beautiful to be in here. Good evening, stay safe, and see you next time.